Sabermetrics Network. So we're a couple of weeks into UFA season, and I've put together a fantastic panel of the sharpest minds in Calgary of statistical analysis.
Don't oversell.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers Justin Azevedo from last week of Match Sticks and Gasoline and Flames Nation. And this week we're lucky to be joined by Marty Clarke of Jets Nation. You might know him as MC Hockey, but not MC Hockey 79. That's a different dude. And then at the end, of course, we have Kent Wilson, who's the managing editor of Nations Network, among many other things. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's really
My pleasure.
Still no beer, which is a little bit disappointing, but
Beer!
Yeah, write that down.
Beer.
Yeah.
Throw it down last time. And what do you want? Ginger ale, milk?
I'm good with beer.
Beer all around. Okay, fair enough. Beer all around. Kent, kick us off. The best and the worst UFA signing so far this year.
You know, the funny thing with the free agency seasons is I usually focus on the worst because there's a lot of bad ones. But this year, it's not out of control this year. It hasn't been a frenzy. It's I mean, there's a couple big ones. I'm not a big fan of signing guys after really peak seasons like Erik Karlsson. I think that might go off the rails for them a bit. Jonathan Quick, 10 years after a career year. And he may be a very good goalie for a long time, but I don't agree with spending that much money on goaltenders like that because they're so unpredictable. So
Right, you're talking about the deals like last year. Remember, James Wisniewski was sort of a career 25, 30-point guy, had this 51-point season,
right.
and he was signed to a long-term, I think it was $5.5 million deal.
To the desperate Columbus Blue Jackets, of course. And
As opposed to guys coming off weak seasons, like really, really bad seasons. Maybe they were hurt, maybe they just had bad luck, or in their own zone, bad teammates, and someone gets into a real bargain.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the worst ones I can focus on right now is Dennis Wideman for the Calgary Flames. And it's not outrageously bad. It's just, it's a lot of money for a guy and a long time, and they threw him the no-movement clause. So they gave him everything, and he's not a difference maker. He's a competent top four guy. He's going to put 35, 40 points on the board, which isn't bad. It's not bad to pay a guy like that a little bit, but he's not a difference maker, especially for the Calgary Flames, who need more top-end talent if they're going to get beyond the middling sort of team that they are now.
see, I talked a little bit about that last week, just in terms of the term. And I mean, I hate term. The money is not an issue nowadays, just because of how big the salary cap is. But giving a 30-year-old a 5-year term, when we've seen so many demonstrated examples of players around that age, exactly.
At 5 years.
It's unnecessary. Like you're essentially harming yourself unnecessarily at that point. It doesn't make any sense.
And you also mentioned, remember last week, that Dennis Wideman is not one of those players that can play the defensive zone a lot, which makes a player more valuable. He's actually quite the opposite. He actually needs a little bit, say, second line offensive zone.
He needs to be sheltered a little bit.
Yeah.
He does need to be sheltered a little bit, and especially to reach that potential of 50. Well, potential is not the right word, but reach that plateau of 50 points. He needs the sheltered minutes, and he needs a lot of power play time. And there's only so much of those to go around, especially on a team like the Flames, who are so desperate for guys that can play those tough minutes. And there's just so many players.
Excel.
Yeah.
There's just so many players that need sheltered minutes right now. Like I look at the roster, I'm like, well, how many of these are going to go to Wideman? Is that really an effective use of your resources? Signing a guy like that and playing him in those situations? I mean, I guess we'll see for sure, but as of right now, I'm not convinced.
That'll ruin the tape a little bit. Just out of curiosity, maybe Marty, you can start us on this one. What sort of player do you think the Flames, defenseman, do you think the Flames should have been targeting instead of Wideman?
And I mentioned it in some of the comments I've made on Flames Nation. Somebody like Barrett Jackman would have been a great fit, I think, because he's a defensive defenseman. He's a big guy. He does everything well. Not going to get you a lot of points, but he would be in your top four, maybe on a shutdown pairing with either Giordano or perhaps Bouwmeester, and he could log a lot of minutes. So that would have been perfect. But, again, you have to also realize it's a supply and demand thing, and I don't think the guy wanted to leave St. Louis, and he never even got to July 1st. But that, I would have loved to see for Flames fans to have somebody like that come in. But was there anybody comparable to him? The only closest guy I can think of, and again, not as good, is a guy still on the market, which is Azevedo. And again, not the talent of Jackman from the defensive perspective, but sort of an all-around okay guy, and kind of like another guy I'm going to mention later. He has that, used to be with the Leaf thing that works against him, that a lot of teams don't seem to want to sign guys that used to be with the Leafs. I'm sure it's just a little, bias, but it seems to be that way, that some of those ex-Leafs have trouble catching on during free agency season.
And I mean, I brought up Koliakko like in March.
Yeah.
But I mean, looking at his year-over-year performance, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that could be attributed to Pietrangelo this year.
But yeah, wasn't he an ex-Leaf too?
No, Steen. I think you're thinking of Steen. Pietrangelo was drafted by the.
Yeah.
No, Koliakko.
Yes,
Definitely.
yes,
That's what I was
yes,
saying.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
he was. But
that's what I meant, yeah.
so Koliakko definitely. I mean, the thing is that he's only going to play 60 games a year. Like he's never going to play a full season. That's just the way that his body works, right? But is it better to have a guy that can produce relatively good minutes for 60 games a year at a price range of like $2 million, or a guy that's out there for 82 games a year who's not going to produce as good as the results, but it's going to cost you $500 to $1 million more dollars, right? So it's kind of cost efficiency thing you have to plan out with, and it really depends on the team. I mean, on a team like the Flames with 9 guys that are already signed to one-way deals, probably would have been a great fit because you have somebody that can step up for 20 games. Like you could probably put TJ Bodie in there for 20 games, and obviously the results won't be as good as if they were with Koliakko in there, but they're going to be good enough. It's not going to be a huge drop-off, right? And that would, a guy like Koliakko is going to save you $3 million against the cap in 4 years of term, as compared to a guy like Dennis Wideman, right? And probably give you the same even strength results.
Yeah, probably the best comparison for Wideman for the Flames is Jason Garrison, who signed obviously in Vancouver for less money.
Yeah.
He doesn't have as sexy point totals, but he's been playing harder minutes the last couple of years.
3 or 4 years younger.
Doing even better than Wideman does in his relatively sheltered minutes. So I don't expect Garrison to score as many goals as he did last year, because he had a really good shooting percentage here. I mean, he can hammer the puck, but even then, he can do top two minutes if they want him to do that in Vancouver. He's doing it for less.
And
I remember us agreeing on that last summer. Like before G. Garrison busted out, we agreed that he was the guy that the Flames should have been trying to get.
Because he played with Weaver the year before, and they just killed it.
Yeah.
And nobody knew either of these two guys down in Florida, just playing the toughest minutes possible. So it's too bad. Of course, would he have played in Calgary for that amount of money? Probably not. It's nice to have Vancouver as an elite team.
Super, super jealous just because they have Dan Hughes and Jason Garrison, who are making like $90 million combined against the cap, and those guys are a legitimate elite #1 pairing. But like you said, would he want to play in Calgary for that much money?
I don't.
Probably not.
Probably not.
And I think the Flames are very focused on we need a better power play quarterback or shooter on the power play. That's why Wideman, and right-handed shot. Wideman's right-handed. I mean, maybe they got carried away with that a little bit. So
The team needed a sexy signing too.
yeah,
There's
it's good for PR.
But I mean, like, honestly, and people like to harp on the right and left shooting part. I don't see it as that much of an issue. If a guy's gonna be good possession-wise, he's gonna be good possession-wise regardless of which way he shoots. Like, I honestly don't care if a guy's playing lefty and he shoots right. Whatever.
I wonder if there's any way to study the effect of that.
Yeah, that would
If
be
there's any
interesting.
effect whatsoever. I don't know.
It would be an interesting study.
I don't know how you want to tell you the
It
truth.
would. I'll have to search to see if that's already out there.
Yeah.
Worst signing, Marty? What's yours?
Well, if we go to RFAs, I'm picking on the team that I cover the most, which would be their starting goalie, Andre Pavlik. They overpaid for him. He was bottom in goals versus threshold. He was something like 969 out of 983 players in the whole league. Save percentage, goals against average. You want to get into the more regular statistics. Just not very good, and they're paying for potential, as I said in my comment for you before. They're hoping he turns into maybe not a Martin Brodeur, but somebody like Kerry Lettinen, who he used to play with. So they really paid a lot there, and
And you bring up the GVT thing, and that's even more worrying for me because GVT kind of artificially overrates goaltenders just based on how important it values the counting stats of goaltenders to a team. So to see a goaltender be like 970, 990,
it was the bottom 3%. I said bottom 10% before, but it's bottom 3%. And the worst goalie, the worst guy on that list happened to be Dwayne Rolson, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
So
Dwayne Rolson actually finished near the bottom in virtually every statistical category I could come up with in terms of goalies.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he is like 84 years old, so
That's true.
So I
Eggs are
don't.
starting to go.
I don't mind Pavlik as a player, but his last few years just haven't proven, if you go through his statistics in any type, that he's an elite goaltender, but they pretty much paid him like one. So, I mean, think of his cap hit is only like $1 million, well, like maybe 1.9 less than Kiprasov, but he's nowhere near Kiprasov in terms of overall quality and like history of strong performance. So, it's
Yeah, he wouldn't even have the leverage that Kiprasov would have had heading in. I mean, he hasn't even been an elite goalie the last 4 or 5 years.
yeah,
He's just been a good goalie, basically.
yeah.
And Pavlik, I mean,
With a big name.
right.
Yeah.
But Pavlik, I mean, that's mediocre goaltending is the cheapest commodity you can probably buy on unrestricted free agency.
Yeah.
And teams consistently don't seem to realize that for whatever reason. Most teams, Detroit Red Wings.
I think the supply was really
Yeah.
low this year, though. The supply was really low in
It
terms
was,
of
yeah.
decent goalies
Yeah.
that were either RFA, which you're not going to get unless they're with your team typically, or UFA. There's not much quality at all left now, especially.
yeah.
And even then, there was only at the start, there was like Harding and Clemenson and
But
Hedberg, Brodeur, older guys.
Yeah, they all basically signed right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for teams looking for goaltending. So-
Maybe that helped certain teams overpaid for the goalies because of that.
There you go.
We've already got the numbers out there.
Oh,
I was
Nice
just showing
cheat sheet.
who's signed it. The best goalie left over who's a UFA that's signed is probably Dan Ellis with Anaheim.
Or Ty Conklin, yeah.
Yeah, Ty Conklin. So I don't know. I think put Ellis above him, but
Yeah,
these are not superstars. So I think the Jets felt pressure to retain him, and his agent did a good job for him. I'm talking about Pavlik here.
Yeah.
Again. So, anyways,
Worst signing. You've had a week to think about your answer.
and we were joking this before. You already took all my A material, which
Yeah.
wasn't really A material; it's more like H material.
Yeah.
But there's just so many ones where you can look at and like, and I talked with the Pavlich one last week, but just jumping into my head now is the Teddy Purcell contract, and not necessarily because I don't like him as a player,
Yeah.
but because it really seems to me that a guy that played for the first time ever with a player who scored 60 goals, most of which, like 49 of which came at even strength. Those might inflate his point totals a little bit to the tune of like however many 45 assists or whatever he got this season, and that's what they're paying him for. So that, I mean,
Yes, and Tampa Bay is one of those teams that really tilts the ice. I mean, guys like JT Wyman and Ryan Shannon just got murdered out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
To
they,
make
they
that-
put their top line out in favorable circumstances all the time,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
much as possible. So you're right.
Yeah, that
But-
really boosted their numbers, their top players. I mean, they're elite talent offensively, of course, but some players really got murdered to make those
and I
opportunities.
mean, you look at Purcell's underlying numbers; they have been.
They've always been pretty good.
Yeah, they have been consistent as well.
Yeah.
Too, but they're not elite level.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're. Although maybe my calibration has to be corrected here, just because of how much money's
Yeah,
being
he's only
thrown
4
around
and
now.
change now.
It's like
isn't he?
4.5.
And a
It's
70
4.5.
million cap. That's not that bad.
So I think it's another 4-year deal, and I'm pretty sure he's 28
Right.
or 27 years old. So once again, it's the term thing and risking that type of point performance. Like if you're just using a guy like Teddy Purcell as a top minutes guy, sure, great, that's awesome. He's probably worth $2.5 million, $3 million on a contract, but giving him the extra 1.5 when you need X, Y, and Z still, especially with the Lightning, and Lightning need a lot of stuff still. You can't just be wasting money like that. And the Flames have been victim of that the past.
No
few
3.5
years,
for Matt Stajan.
that is true, but it could be.
What about
That's a boost.
what about Martin Brodeur? I ran some GVS on the contracts that were out there, assuming they play next year at the same level they did this year, which I know isn't a safe assumption, but just using that as a starting point. The $4.5 million they paid Martin Brodeur, who was a bottom 10% goalie in the
Until
regular
the
season at
playoffs,
least.
right?
Yeah, in the regular season at least. In fact, his save percentage at even strength is exactly the same as Steve Mason. And
Yeah.
no one would give Steve Mason $4.5 million for 2 years, especially in their 40s. So according to GVS, his contract was actually the riskiest or the most questionable. And yet I haven't seen that really bubble up on anyone's list of worst signings. What do you guys think of Martin Brodeur? Is it the name that's worth a couple
So
million?
it's the same thing that we're running into with teams like the Flames here. Like he still's got the cash
The
of
aura,
elite, right?
yeah.
Exactly. He's like, oh, this is a guy that goes out there and wins. He steals games for you. Look at how many games.
And the playoff run. I mean, I think no doubt if they flame out in the first round, I'm not sure they give Marty that,
Yeah.
especially 2
Agreed.
years.
I think he's
Yeah,
retiring
just
at that
about
point.
time.
Yeah.
I don't think he's coming back. I think he's retiring at the end of the first round if they lose to Florida, wherever the hell they were playing. But yeah, the fact that he is able to go to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and actually, he played relatively well in the playoffs. Like his even strength save, obviously small sample size, but his even strength save percentage was .927. I
Sometimes
think.
guys get hot at the right time.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Right? That's the lasting memory. Is that he was.
Well, and
Clutch
Marty's
in the
been
playoffs.
mediocre or worse for a couple of
Oh,
years now. That it wasn't just a one-off.
Yeah.
It's a steady downhill slope here, and
Yeah.
the guy's 40, 41 years old, right? So it's a bad bet. It is a bad bet.
And I wouldn't be I wouldn't be surprised if the team that's now going into bankruptcy protection or whatever, the New Jersey Devils, decide to really regret this in year 2 because they're going to have a goaltender who's putting up an 890 or a 900 save percentage, and they're going to be giving him $4 million plus.
It can also be compared to the Flames keeping a Ginla for that brand name, sells ticket kind of value. Well, he's going to sell his ticket, so we can pay him $4.5 million, and he might get hot like he did in the playoffs, and he might steal some games. But is he going to, win 45 games next year? If they were to play him in 70, I doubt it.
They're paying a player to be a mascot, right?
So,
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially.
As for this one, thanks for watching, and I'd like to thank my guests, Justin Azevedo, Marty Clarke, and Kent Wilson. If you have any questions for any of them, you can find them on their respective websites, Matchsticks and Gasoline, Jets Nation, and Flames Nation. And of course, you can reach me, Vollman at hockeyabstract.com. Catch you next time. Thanks a lot.
All right.
And then we just look like we're talking for a minute.
Wrestle some papers.
That's right.
All right.